old school Aretha. And what's happening? I know you're not doing it, but somewhere, yeah, Amy's got it going. Yeah, how can you not move? Oh, throw my cords. How can you not, is that answer? How can you not, when you hear certain songs, start to move, right? I know you do it, you're in your car, right? You crank up, whether it's Spotify or Apple Music or your own stuff. We are humans, we hear music and we want to move, right? So when I was doing my doctoral stuff, I did mindful exercise, did my dissertation on mindful exercise and perceived mood in community college students. Why? What do you guys going on? Lots of anxiety, right? Lots of ways of how can we diffuse and how can we find ways. And one of the things that I found, Kelly McGonigal, Dr. McGonigal's a health psychologist out of Stanford University. And I had the good fortune of seeing her at a presentation at UIC. But for some of you who there's a TED talk that she did years ago about making stress your friend. And it's a really kind of a cool thing. And that's how I got to know her. But she came up with this book about the joy of movement. And it was fascinating. It got me thinking, how can I do things for movement? So this is a lot of what I did here going to be based on things that she has written about. All right, as humans, we are designed to move. From little kids, look at little kids. What do little kids do? They move. Do they worry about dancing, right? Or movement? They just move when they want to. And then we get older, and then we get used to things. And so we have the capability to sense and respond to the movements that move us in our own ways. And then exercising this kinetic creativity is not only exceptionally useful, but it generates feelings of well-being. And that's really the key of everything today, is your well-being and how we use movement, physical movement, for well-being. So, because I always feel like running. How your neck is designed? Because there's no such place. Our feet. Our feet are different. They can be bound over time. So when you look at our feet, we used to live in the trees, right? Grasping, having different types of things. We don't do that now. What are they designed to do? They're designed to push off, for running, for walking. Well, look at this ligament here. This neutral ligament runs from the base of our skull to our spine, and it is shared with other running species, so other animals that run. It keeps our heads from bobbing. Or actually, we can bob, but not hurt yourself. So it is a fascinating evolutionary process for us. So, do or don't. Your body will become better at whatever you do or don't do. And we know this. We know this from anything, right? We know this from our sleep. We know this from even what we do study academically. But if we don't move our body, we're going to make us better at not moving. How many people here have seen individuals who have been bedridden or who don't move? And what happens? They're not good at moving anymore. So the importance of all ages can benefit from movement. Anyone can benefit from movement. Now, the other thing that I won't have time to do here, but I will do it in some of my classes, because there was a group out of North Central, Naperville Central, North Campus, I think. They had a couple of their teachers develop these brain breaks because of sitting. What happens when we sit? When we sit too long, we get other problems, leads to heart disease, even lead to things like cancer, obesity, low back and spinal issues. How many of you just know when you sit all day, your back hurts, your neck hurts? And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to break away from, even in your classes. If you have to stand up for a moment, do that. Take advantages of breaks that you have at school, opportunities. We know we do the
Tuesday, Timeout Tuesdays, which is for meditation and movement, which is so important. So here's the other thing, the negative side. What does the media present us all the time? We're always getting these images, and they start very, very young, of how we should look, how we should compare ourselves. Social media has upped this even more, because now we have these images of what you should look like, what you should be. And then the thing is, instead of being told, look like this, we want to focus more on our ability to move and less on calories and appearance. All right, so what can it teach? So from Dr. McGonagall's book, yoga, those of you who have taken yoga, taking a deep breath and move out of your comfort zone. How many of you have taken a class and you weren't that comfortable, you went in there and you felt awkward? I felt awkward. I remember going into a yoga class, old guy yoga class. It was very awkward. You have to get out of your comfort zone sometimes and get into those moments, and then realize that when you do exercise, you are in your own space generally. In dance, any dancers in here? Dancers. Sometimes I have some dancers in my classes. What do we learned that music and movement, it can take us to another place. Also, we're going to see later on about how this collectiveness of movement together is so important. Cardio, well, our pounding heart is not always a sign that we should be fearful. Our pounding heart is telling us our heart's responding to what's happening. And it's going to then deliver more oxygen to all those parts of the bodies that need it. It can shift our mood, and it can allow us to kind of loosen up. It can give us hope when we move. It can also empower us with a sense of our own strength when we start to actually physically move and begin to feel better. And it works on all levels. Anyone in this room right now, you guys come in if you're here for this, it's okay. If you are in this room, no matter what your age is, you can create benefit in your body. Anyone can move. If someone has a disability that keeps them in, say, wheelchair bound, even moving upper arms and their limbs generate different things in your body, which are some of the things we're going to get into a little bit later here. So the other thing it does, we also can practice better self-care, give us a chance to take on challenges, and we make friends. If you exercise and you go out, it's always easier you have an exercise buddy. And I can tell even from here in this class, I have some lab buddies who came into this class, in my bio class. What happens when you connect with someone in a classroom? You have that connection, physical fitness, exercise, having that workout buddy, that person who will go out and run with you, critically important. And we become communities, which is another thing that's really important. We celebrate each other. And this is a part that we're going to talk about a little bit more. I love this thing. This is called collective effervescence. And this is what happens when we bring people together in unity, in movement. And there's going to be some examples of what we saw with this. So what's the purpose of it? Our brain was designed not to prevent disease. We are designed to physically engage with our life. And when we do that, movement tells your brain to be active and to engage in the things around you. And the other part of it is that we have all these benefits. We were not, as I said earlier, designed to be sedentary. And we evolved in a world that required us to explore our environment. So you think back when we came back out of our evolutionary phases, what did we have to do? To take the environment around us and learn from it. And it required us to move. And without that stimulation, the brain ceases. And we can see this. People who don't move, people who are sedentary, we can see that their cognitive levels decline. And when we no longer use our brains to organize physical action, it also becomes atrophy. It becomes disorganized. And that's one of the reasons why when we look at things like Wordle and different types of brain games for your head, great. But more so, we need to get people, especially through their lifespan, to move. to physically move all the time. And feel free, if you ever have at any point a question here, I don't mean stop. We increase neural chemicals in our brain, our neurotransmitters. When we improve our memory, it lengthens our attention span. Oh, also, when you exercise, then study. Don't go on the treadmill and try to exercise and study. Because all the studies have shown, if you go on a treadmill or a bike or run and you do that physical activity and then study, you retain more than when you're trying to do it at the same time. So it improves. So you see people on a treadmill and you're actually hurting yourself because you're asking your brain to do two different things at that time. There is a carryover. And one of the things that happens too is, again, the Naperville High School, they have these students combining different activities for movement. They would have a gymnastics class where they end up tumbling and doing activities, and then first aid combined with it. Now you think first aid and tumbling. But what happens when we do inversion, when we see the yoga, inversions upside down, but what happens when we move like that, we also stimulate parts of our brain. And we find that there's more retention. And also movements that are cross-lateral, like swimming, when you move, you actually retain more. They found students who were doing swimming activities actually retained more and did better on tests within a certain period of time frame. And improve new nerve cells. We grow dendrites in our brain. So when you are doing physical activity, deep inside your brain, there's an area called the hippocampus. Hippocampus is where we take memory. And this is an area particularly where we strengthen our memories. So memory is confined to different parts of the brain, but we do know that when people, like, for example, in Alzheimer's, right, they can't remember things. They can remember things way from the past. But when we do physical activity, the neural endings in our brain begin to grow more of them, which could be a way that we could improve our memory as we age and maybe stave off some of the impact of Alzheimer's. All right, it also makes us happy. When you move, you are happy. And psychological social benefits movement do not depend on any particular physical ability or health status, any kind of movement. So butt dancing in your car is a movement. It's good. It helps. And it can help with people with chronic pain, physical disabilities, mental health issues, even individuals with hospice care. One of the greatest things I saw with this woman who did hospice work, massage and movement. And this is an area, hospice, okay, time for a person to transition. But now we're seeing that we can make those things even better. It also can take us from our feelings of isolation, despair. There's a lot of people who feel isolated in this world. There's a lot of people who also are hesitant to do things. And think about moments in your life when you were moving or active and how you felt. And the thing is, you can recapture those things. Movement makes us happy. And in addition, what we have around the world, people who are physically active have been in surveys happier, more satisfied with their lives. And this was true regardless if you're a walker, a swimmer, a biker, weightlifter, yoga, if you did it individually or collectively. Now, are there going to be things that we get differently collectively when we're in a group? Yeah. People who exercise regularly have a stronger sense of purpose. They experience more gratitude and love and hope. And so when you think about the stresses in the world and how we have to deal with different things, and also I think gratitude is a really important word to look at. How do we feel towards different things? And we can see this again across the lifespan. Every socioeconomic strata, and these also appear to be culturally universal. So these things feelings occur in people regardless, no matter where you are in the world, no matter where you are socioeconomically. These are all things that are triggered and developed through movement. So I had to put this one in. So the psychological effect of movement cannot reduce to the endorphin rush. Physical movement influences other brain chemicals. So anyone know what endorphins are?
Endorphins. What do you got? No, that's what we're going to, that's what we're going to, that's what I'm going to fight you on. So endorphins. Endorphins have always been told this is what happens. You get the runner's high and you get your endorphin rush. We're going to tell you about something else. So the endorphins generally work as your painkiller. So when you injure yourself, you release endorphins right away to help you with pain, so you never hurt yourself. And when running, when you get to that level, you can create endorphins, but that allows you to transition through the pain of what you're doing. But it's not actually what's going to give you that feeling of happiness when you run, or the feeling of calm. Have any of you been at that point where you've been exercising and you're just like in that zone, right, Sam? That comes from something different. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But physical movement, chemicals that give us energy, alleviate worry, bond with others, so our connections, reduces inflammation in the brain, which also, inflammation is a really killer. We think of inflammation when we cut ourselves and we get an injury. We have inflammation in our heart. We have inflammation in our brain. Inflammation can be pervasive in our bodies, and illnesses that create inflammation, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, things like that, can be very debilitating for people. So in the happiness research, so they were tracking people, and people are happier in moments of physical activity. When forced to be sedentary, so you take physically active people, and they took them in the UK and the US, and they forced them to be sedentary for 2 weeks. Guess what happened? They became more anxious, tired, and hostile within 2 weeks. Just because they took away their movement. So here's how reduced physical activity impacts us mentally. So then they were told to reduce daily activity, and they use step counts. So how many of you use a Fitbit or something to track your steps? So what happens, 88% became more depressed within a week of the activity. 31 reported decline in life satisfaction. The average step count to induce feelings of anxiety and decrease was 5,000, just under 5,700 steps. Okay. Average steps in the U.S. is 4,000 steps. We're a full 1,000 steps below what it is to raise us up. And globally, it's also down. So you can see just that the level of movement is so important. Now, here's the point. Can we go beyond happy? Now, this Dan Strum, he talked about the runner's high. You may have heard about the runner's high, that feeling people run, they get to that point, all of a sudden they just feel completely connected to the world. He said, I flew closer and closer to the place where mystics, shamans, and acid heads all try to describe. Each moment became precious. I felt simultaneously all alone and completely connected. So this was his experience as a runner. And we're going to talk about this runner's high. And here's the thing. Yeah. Told you it was going to be old school market for ourselves. So that feeling that people get when they're at that moment. So long distance running, longer, moderate, intense aerobic activity can produce that runner's high. Now, this is a deep, relaxing feeling. And I know you do yoga, right? You get that point where most people, when they come out of a yoga class or out of a long run, don't want to beat up anybody. They don't want to fight with anybody. I don't even want to yell at people in the car. And that's my bad point. So the runner's high has long been credited to the endorphins that we're talking about. They are produced. They take away the pain. New research shows the euphoric experience is caused by a different molecule, one that we haven't really discovered until 1988. And you may not be familiar or aware of it or the name, but the sound of it, when I put the name up here, you might get a connection to it. They're endocannabinoids. So what are endocannabinoids? Yeah, they sound like what you think they are. So endocannabinoids, also called endogenous cannabinoids, are structurally similar to molecules from cannabis. And they are produced by your body, though.
So what happened, and we're going to see in the next slide coming up, but the endocannabinoids alleviate pain, they boost mood, they also have a connection with the runner's high. Feelings of disappearance of worry, slowing of time, heightening of the senses. Now, the thing about these, they did not understand these and find them until 1988. I tell my students all the time, science is fluid, science is always evolving. We're learning new things all the time. So that's why, science isn't perfect, because it can only take what it knows at one time. But our bodies are amazing, and we didn't even know these were around until 1988. And what happened is the endocannabinoids bind to what we call endocannabinoid receptors. And they are critical. Right now, they are going in your body. They serve as like little traffic cops in your brain. And they are moment-to-moment functioning, from learning to memory to emotional processing, sleep, temperature control, pain regulation, immune response. And what happens, we have two main types of these. So the CB1s, these are found in our central nervous system, and these are in our brain, but primarily in the brain. The CB2s, these are the peripheral nervous system. Now what we do, these are mainly found in our gut area. We'll talk about that in a moment here. But this anandamide, AED, was first discovered, was the first cannabinoid discovered. And in 1992, they gave it the cute name, the bliss molecule, because they discovered that when they found these particular endocannabinoids, that they had this effect on people. So here is the endocannabinoids. So the CB1 receptors outnumber. So we have a lot more of these in our body. And they act like little traffic cops, and they control levels of activity of most of the neurotransmitters. So we have neurotransmitters that are sending things. So like when you do a muscle contraction, you send a message, and what happens when that nerve innervates that muscle, it releases a neurochemical. In that case, acetylcholine, and that causes release of chemicals for you to contract your muscle. And we have these going on throughout our body. And so what happens, they will adjust things like hunger, temperature, alertness, and these are the endocannabinoids. And then we have our CB2 receptors, and these are mainly in our immune system. And they play a role in our inflammation. So if you look at this, the CB1s, this is brain, lungs, vascular system, muscles, gastrointestinal tract, reproductive organs. The CB2s are spleen, bone, skin, and then we see both of them working. What we're seeing in this in particular, what's fascinating is that individuals, we have a lot of individuals with gastrointestinal issues, IBS, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. So what we can see with these is that if we're producing movement, the right kind of movement, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, when we do that, we're going to be able to improve these receptors. And that can take a lot of benefit for people with those types of, especially autoimmune disorders. So when we talk about autoimmune disorders, things that cells that are attacking our own healthy cells. So this is another thing where science has just learned within the last 30 years. Now, even more, there's our amygdala, right there. Remember I talked about hippocampus, this one, but the amygdala, this is an area of brain, this regulates our stress response. It's deep inside our brain, and it also works with our limbic system and the hippocampus. This is where we have our emotion, our behavior, fear. I love the limbic system. I love when we talk about it in our classes. This is where we have what separates us from other species. This is where we can have emotion and feelings and memories. And it's really connected in our brain. And so it's also CB1 endocannabinoids are huge in this area. And so again, when we activate these, this is an area that hits our brain and can bring anxiety levels down. And this occurs through different types of movement. So when they did research, this David Rachlin, he's out at the University of Arizona, he put runners on treadmills. And they did workouts for different intensities. And this was really critical because I come from a background of exercise science and kinesiology. And what happens in sports most of the time is we're thinking you've got to do max effort. You got to really push yourself. And research shows our bodies respond differently. So when people walked really slow, they didn't activate these endocannabinoids the same way. And I've seen them, treadmills, the mall walkers, right? You got to have a little bit. We have to hit a certain threshold. Running at maximal effort, though, we didn't produce the endocannabinoids. Joggers, however, increased them threefold, and it correlated with the runner's self-reported feelings of anxiety or their runner's high. So the brain rewards us for exercising as intensities that are similar, that are successful for hunting and gathering. So we get disconnected in that way from where we came from. You know, there are still, we're going to see there's still some tribes out there who are hunter and gatherers. But what happened if you try to run all day, you're not going to last, right? You're not going to last, and you're not going to be able to find things to eat and survive. If you go too slow, you're not going to, or you could get eaten by something. So what Ratchland proposes is that early humans ran at these levels to invoke this feeling of calm as they were going through their hunter and gathering. Now, here's our ancestral roots. The Hazda tribe in Africa. Now, unfortunately, a lot of our native tribes like this are starting to disappear. There's one I know in Brazil that they're really concerned about now. But they averaged, they got activity trackers on them. They averaged 2 hours of vigorous to moderate vigorous activity, plus 2 more hours of light walking. There is no difference in men and women in the activity levels. And they found no cardiovascular disease, lower blood pressure, healthier cholesterol, and triglycerides, and the C-reactive protein, which is something that we can measure in blood that can tell you if you might be prone for a heart attack. And they also showed no levels of depression or anxiety. Now, I'm not saying we all should go out hunting and gathering, but we can see what movement do. Now, let's look at our animal friends. You know, yesterday was Cat Appreciation Day, just so you know. Hope you appreciate your cats. But Ratchland further tested dogs and ferrets, and I thought this was really fascinating. Oh, you forgot about your cat, right? Okay, make up for it today. Dogs are hunters, and they chase prey over long distances, while ferrets are nocturnal, hunting small animals when they sleep. So difference how they get their food. Both ran on treadmills, which I love to see a ferret and a dog on a treadmill. That would be really cool. But they drew them the endocannabinoids. 30 minutes, dogs showed an increase in endocannabinoids where ferrets did not. Why? Dogs had to pace themselves, right? Ferrets had a much easier time. They went to things were sleeping, so they didn't have to put out the effort. Dogs, again, they have a different way. And what we're looking at is how does that connect with us? What happens though? So we took activity away from people. This study, Rimnoblat, which is now banned, this was going to be a way to suppress appetite. So this drug was out, and the clinical trials, they had to stop it because they were so alarming because these blocked endocannabinoids, and they increased anxiety, depression, and they had 4 suicides in the trials just by blocking this endocannabinoid that's being produced in our bodies. In rodents who love to run, when they were given this, they significantly dropped the amount of activity that they ran. So we can see that as we look at research, how does this affect? So what happens when we don't move? Maybe because of injury or illness, or who have chosen not to be very sedentary. Look at their mental health. Look at how they feel. Look at how their lives are. And there's a really big connection. We are designed to move, and it's important for us to move. Now, there's also a dose response. So how do you get to that blissful moment? Anything that keeps your heart rate that's enough to trigger that reward. It's kind of like from not giving up. Those of you who've ever exercised, you've ever been on a sports team, you had to do something. There's a point where you have to keep going. And that point, that's that trigger. You have to keep going. So when you're low level, starting out, that little bit further, not to push yourself to injury or anything like that. But that's when it starts to, that's when you start to have it. It's where it begins to activate in your body. What they found, hiking, swimming, cycling, dance, yoga, all of those, but only after a certain degree of effort. So again, like those wall walkers who are just walking really slow or on a treadmill, you have to up it up, but you don't have to make that movement so.
And cannabinoids come from
Okay.
Pretty
Get back to it.
Yeah, let's get back to
Yeah.
it. I just thought it.
So the endocannabinoids are produced in your body.
Oh, can like mental stimulation produce endocannabinoids?
Well, so you have things going on. The bigger thing, so when you talk about mental stimulation, you're talking about what? Like
maybe
meditation?
music, maybe
Okay.
meditation,
So
maybe doing more.
what I'm trying to do with this is that I put all this music in these slides to integrate how important music is. Two things. Music helps us motivate. And most of the time, how many of you, if you forget your earbuds to exercise, and it's like, right? I can't exercise now. And so we see that connection with it. And what happens is that we also are going to look at how yoga in particular works a different protein in our body, in our brain. So with that, so that's a good, I have to look a little bit more at how that can increase with the endocannabinoids, because again, this research here is relatively new. All right, addiction and exercise. So there is a connection. Go on, find out, and study some of these influencers who are out there in exercise. A lot of them have had huge addiction problems. They substituted one addiction for another. So they went from alcohol or some substance to now ultra marathons. And that's not uncommon because there are similarities of how addiction and exercise work in the brain. So the psychological effects are often compared to substances that are more mind altering. Runner's high actually can mimic a cannabis buzz. Synchronized dance can produce a feeling that people get from ecstasy. Moving to music and adrenaline that is similar to stimulants. Now, this is the easy part. Grabbing a drink or whatever you want and altering yourself that. But the thing is, this is going to be a lot harder, and the end result's going to be how addiction, how exercise counters some of the really negative things that go on in addiction. And this is kind of fascinating about how exercise and movement plays into it. So, addiction, how do you differ? So, substances, abuse, they unnatural flood of feel-good chemicals. So you take something, you get these, and it messes with the homeostatic mechanisms of the brain. How does the brain compensate for this? It goes and compensates for that drug effect by activating the anti-reward system. So we have a reward system, and a reward system. And it works to dampen the feel-good thing. So, like you saw in Catholic school. Anything good, bring it back up. So the anti-reward system kicks in when the brain is flooded with high levels of dopamine and endorphins. So dopamine is also one of these things that we look at as a feel-good chemical. The brain responds, pulling the plug out of a bathtub. So it doesn't overflow. So once because all of a sudden you're triggering all these things. The body likes homeostasis. If anyone who's ever had me for a teacher will know we talk about that all the time. Body goes out of homeostasis, it wants to come back in. It doesn't like to be out of disconnect. So what happens, regularly triggering the anti-reward system through abuse, you teach the system to stay activated even when you're not high. So it's activating this, and that then leads to some significant issues. So dopamine. This is our feel-good unit. This is our transmitter that works between our neurons. The brain releases dopamine. Look at these things. We crave it. Things like sex, pleasure. We go and we want to go back. How many of you have been on vacation? How do you feel after you come back? Oh, how do you feel after you come back from vacation?
right? What happens is we trigger these feelings, right? And then what happens, we want to go back to them. We live in a world of heat. This is normal. This is doing laundry. This is making dinner. This is the stuff that we have to do every day. Oh, I got to put gas in my car. And then we go on vacation. It's great. And then we come back from vacation and everything crashes. So what happens is that when we are doing this in addiction, what are we trying to get to? Always back to that super high moment. And so this dopamine boosts mood, motivation, attention, regulates movement, learning, and emotional responses. Now, when we have chronic drug use, it lowers the levels of dopamine that circulate in the brain, and it reduces the availability of the receptors to activate our reward system, which is important. So both changes can leave us in feeling unmotivated, antisocial, unable to enjoy pleasure, and that's the dark side. So that little clip is, I saw, that's one of that I've long time musician Gil Scott-Heron talking about trying to kick addiction because it's hard. Anyone who's ever tried to just change behavior, try to get up earlier. It's hard, right? Try to make any behavioral change. And then when you are doing something that's a substance that is bombarding you with these areas, and then you have to try to stop it. And then there's going to be this complete drop. That's why addiction becomes so hard, which is also why we see so many people translate from addiction to intense exercise, which is good, is better, but that also can be problematic because over-exercising, intense exercising like that can lead to kinds of other health issues, especially in women, can lead to disordered eating, can lead to menstrual cycle irregulation, early osteoporosis. Can also have social implications because that begins all that you do. Now, exercise produces less extreme spike in dopamine and other feel-good chemicals, like cocaine, chemicals like cocaine wild up our system. So boom, huge intense. And then what happens, it wears off, those things drop and they want to go back to it. So here, the brain reacts to regular exercise not by suppressing activity in the reward system, but facilitating it. And in direct contrast to drug abuse, exercise leads to higher circulations of dopamine, more available dopamine receptors, and your capacity for pleasure expands. Guess what? As we age, our brains change. 13% of dopamine receptors in the reward area each passing decade. Though this leads to less enjoyment, but physical activity can prevent this decline. That's why it's so important. If we have anything, we have an older population occurring in this country and throughout the world. Countries like Japan, Italy also have aging populations. And the thing is, aging populations put a stress on healthcare, mental health services, and the simple act of being physically active and moving can help eliminate. Are we going to get everyone? No, but we can make changes. People can be older and live productive lives, healthy lives, and also be more mentally competent as they move along through life. Now, here's another thing that goes on. Our muscles, when we exercise, they produce proteins and they synthesize proteins and peptides, and they secrete a hormone called myokines. Myo meaning muscle, and myokines go into our bloodstream every time they contract. So, when you are producing myokines, running, movement, weightlifting, it makes your brain more resilient to stress, and it also has an antidepressant effect on the body. All muscles produce myokines, and the scientists dub them, we had the bliss molecule, this is the hope molecule. And so what it does, by lowering depression, that can elevate people's feelings of well-being. Now, humans were hardwired to take pleasure in activities and experiences and mental health and mental states that help us survive. There is always that connection between our root of who we are as animals, as our species. Humans find teamwork and cooperating fulfilling. No, I know you don't like group work. I know that. But in general, when people are together on projects, working together, it also helps us with our social networks. Now, so we've talked about all these about chemical things, we're talking about physical things, we're talking about endocannabinoids and endorphins, but now we also have to look at our social connections that we make. And when we do things, so movement intertwined with some of the basic human joys include self-expression, social connection, and mastery. So why do we watch sports on TV? Why do we participate in sports? Why do we find these things? Why do we get together for different activities? It's because we are actually wired for that. We are social beings. Not everyone's an extrovert, but even introverted people look for social connections. This is the part, though, that I find, what is it that goes beyond just that? There's a higher self to all of us. So when you let the pleasure be your guide, you access your primal nature, intuition, and creativity. So how many, I got a lot of psych majors, right, don't I? Yeah, Maslow hierarchy of needs. What do we need to do at the very, we have to have all these other things met, and then we can be creative, and we can go beyond that. So how do we get to that point? So through movement, we can have our desire to connect to nature. Why do we go out for hikes? Why do we want to be in nature? Why do we go to the mountains? Because there's a connection to the outdoors. Key little meme right now is hiking is mean yoga, and actually doing yoga hikes. People hiking, you combine yoga and hiking. So, but movement has the power to bring us fully to what is most human about it. And so movement, whether through labor, ritual, or play. So this is interesting. Sometimes we have things that we have to work together, physically work together, and it brings you together. When you have things where you have to collaborate together, when you have rituals. Now think about rituals. We are a species that uses a lot of ritual. You think about just in like religious rituals, right? Different types of things that we bring in, and we have our different celebrations that have rituals. So this is what collective effervescence. So this sociologist, Emil Durkheim, when individuals come in close contact with another, and when they are assembled in such a fashion, certain electricity is created and released, leading participants to a high degree of collective, emotional, and excitement, or even freedom. And we can see this in some of the different types of things. Movement in societal life, when a group of individuals that make up a society comes together in order to perform a religious ritual, for example. So getting together, we're exercising together, working together, cooperating together are also part of the movement. And the thing is, it has a collective effect on us. Movement helps us feel connected to each other. And I'm sure, go to your exercise classes, I'm sure you've seen with the Tuesdays, right? People join together with us. And when you are doing these things, you don't feel, you're in that moment, and the outside world can take a break for a second, because it's going to come back. We know that. And we also have heart rates. This is how we bring in those physical things that are going on in our body. And the more you get your heart rate up, the closer you feel to people in unison. And so dancing, right? Dancing is an amazing thing. I dance at court. They don't want to see me. Don't go to weddings anymore. But when we do it, dancing is cooperative, and it's movement, and it also breaks inhibition in a lot of cases. So when you see other people moving, you move with them. That's the collective part of things. And this is why, group exercise classes, why some people gravitate to those, because they're doing. In yoga, what happens? You're following the lead of others, yet you're also in your own space. And those types of movements together. So what they see in dance is that it integrates these perceptions. The more connective you feel to others, and this boundary of who you are dissolves because it comes into you as the group. And that's what, next time you are dancing or you see people dancing, try to take note of that. What about engagement? I love this. This was participants playing economic game. So we took economic game, and it required contributing money to a communal pool. And so what happened, the more you contributed, the more parties would benefit, found that participants who exercised 30 minutes prior to the game gave more for the count. They felt more of a connection. This one, this Good Gym in London, they combined running. People like to run. Did is they connected runners to elderly individuals who were homebound, and it was a way to bring and desire contact. So they would run, they would stop off at these homes and visit these elderly people, and then they would run back. And they would run for a group in a mile or two, then provide the services, and they run back. And it took the people who were doing the running, but it also involved them socializing with others. So I love this. I love this because they talk about, Dr. McGonigal talked about we energy. So how do we get this? If you've ever been in military situations, right, military people, what do? They train them together. But this other one, there's a group called Recovery on the Water in Chicago. And what they do, they use rowing, and they have this in other cities, but rowing for breast cancer survivors. And it's amazing because what happens, you know, breast cancer is a very difficult, especially if they have mastectomies, and rowing can be very hard. But it also can be very helpful muscularly. And so what happens, these women find this collective joy together in being able to. So these women made me feel like I was part of something bigger than themselves, something collective. That's what we talk about when we go beyond this higher level outside of ourselves. And the feeling of collective joy is also why fitness, why you make connections, or why you do something together with someone. And we've started, last semester we started our meditation Mondays. And now we do Time Out Tuesdays, where we combine meditation and movement. We also now have a class on Monday and Wednesdays from 12:15 to 1 of a stretch and strength class open to anyone. When people go to these things, and what you start to see the same faces go, you start to see the same people connected, because this is a way where if you feel that you rise above things. Now, any group of physical activity, so any group that works together can invoke that same. So you can look at something like Habitat for Humanity. Habitat for Humanity, what are you doing? You're building homes, working together, physical labor, collective. Come over here. If you haven't, find Margot Underwood, volunteer for Foster Palooza. Margot does this, yes?
Can I mention too the Sustainability Union?
Yes,
we do
yes, you can.
Restoration Work Day.
Yes.
So you're going to be.
That's coming up, isn't it?
Yep, it's this Saturday or Sunday from 8 to noon, but basically.
April 2nd.
April 2nd. Where they have people come cut down these trees and then you drag them into piles with a big group of people. And every time I've done it, I've felt so good because it's just the exercise and the community and being in nature. So
The Natural Sciences Department, our grounds, all of you should take advantage. I do it in my classes. Spring's a little rough, but we try to get out. I take you out on the trails and walk the trail with you, because our area here at JJC, yeah, you're going. We have all this beautiful outdoor area, and we use it as an outdoor laboratory. Some of you, if you want to have fun, take Bio 104 with Professor Hieneman. You'll get out into the lake, and you'll be digging up and getting samples. You'll be bringing them back into the lab to see what's out here. It is connection. It is funny because everyone who comes through the nature walk, it's one of the things I hear all the time that people enjoy. All right, how is the right movement for you? Whatever you can do. So the thing is, finding the right movement can be challenging. People, older people like myself, maybe there are movements we didn't feel we should do, didn't feel comfortable doing. And right, yeah, sometimes, you know, you see crazy Uncle Eddie at the wedding. I'm not sure if I'm happy with those moves, but we're also often told things that are not appropriate for our gender or for our age. And we're often not exposed to the diversity of movements. And so one of the things that's really interesting as an aside here is the sociology aspect of kinesiology. And if you look at what physical movement and the joy in physical movement and physical accomplishment, what goes on now in in sports, when someone does something, wow, now sometimes it can be overdone, but there's excitement. If you went back into the 1960s, it was pretty dull. You know, it was everything. No, you can't show any emotion with things. But that gets transformed to us too. We all know that males in general, we have harder times with feelings and emotion. And this in here too, we feel uncomfortable that we shouldn't do things a certain way. So finding the right kind of movement, experiment, play with things. Be that person who gets out of that comfort zone and goes to something. Now, mindful exercise. So how does mindfulness play into this? So we want heart rates up, right? And that works with our endocannabinoids. It improves our social bonds. But we can also do slower movements, yoga, tai chi, qigong, mindful walking. So these are areas that increase brain neurotransmitters. They block areas associated with anxiety and stress, and especially perceived anxiety. So here's the thing. We perceive this. Today coming in, I did not have the best morning. I had some things. I got a lot of paint on my sweaters. What I was going to wear is had a whole new look. I ended up getting behind very slow moving people, and my immediate thing was all this perceived anxiety. I'm going to be slower getting here. And in reality, though, it didn't slow me down at all. Everything was moving along. I just didn't like this person in front of me, for whatever that is, right? But the thing is, our perceptions of what's making us anxious, our perceptions of reality, those are things that we have to, of our anxiety. We have to be able to understand that difference between what is real and what are we creating. And that's important. And when we do things, one of the things that happens is GABA, and this comes to your point, Ash. This is what gets increased with things like yoga. So GABA increases, it's a neurotransmitter, and it reduces stress and pain. It also helps with concentration and sleep, which is why they have certain types of, I believe it's yoga nidra, which helps with more sleep, different types of things that can induce things based on what's going on in your brain. So the GABA effect, what we have here, this is an inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. What it does, it blocks messages from nerve cells to the brain spinal cord. Specifically, it blocks nerve signals that reduce fear, anxiety, and stress. When they did studies on yoga, as well as things like Tai Chi and mindful walking, they found we increased this upwards to like 27% in your brain. This is why generally you don't see fist fights outside a yoga studio, right? Because when people are getting things collectively, working together, they're also getting the bonding that comes from working collective, moving together, movement, and the GABA effect in the brain. So all of these things, in addition, are found to increase CB1 endocannabinoid reception. So it makes those receptors better. Now, here's the yoga, and the hiking is the new yoga. Movement that occurs in nature alters your brain. This is another one I love here. People reported feeling connected to all aspects of life and feeling more hopeful. And an Austrian study found that individuals who had previously attempted suicide, the addition of mountain hiking to their standard of medical care reduced suicidal thoughts and hopelessness. Now, granted, they weren't taking away their medications, but they were adding this into it, and they were seeing a reduction. So our brains can do amazing, wonderful things. What about music? Well, we're hardwired. That's why I put music in all these slides, right? I put these in here because we respond to music. Whatever your music type of choice is, what happens? It works in our dopamine, our endorphin rush. We use energy. We call this our ergogenic or our work enhancement. How many of you put music on when you're doing something? You're cleaning the house. You're doing some activity, right? You crank on music because it helps you do work together easier. Peak experience of adolescence and young adulthood also provide us a sense of time. That's why we're drawn to certain music. That's why you heard old school Aretha in here and some other things because I'm old. But there's some movement. But Parkinson's, what happens to Parkinson's? Parkinson's is a brain disorder, balance, communication, cognition, mental health, social isolation. We found that patience and dancing improved in Parkinson's. What's going on with Parkinson's? Also movement, right? They're getting more hesitant movements and they're much more prone to fall. Alzheimer's and exercise dendrites, another one. All right, so what happens next? So where is fitness and exercise going in the future? So we saw pre-pandemic, right? We started seeing things like Peloton. I know Peloton's had their issues, right? But we've seen all these things that we have a screen and you can connect to it. We also have live stream yoga. You live stream your meditations, don't you? We also have personal training. Here's the thing, I love this. This is absolutely insane. They have running drones. Yeah, you're like personal running drone. You're running, the drone is there. I guess it helps motivate you or scares the crap out of you. One or the other. But we also have to be careful about our social networks, right? So we spend a lot of time being social in many ways, right? But not necessarily with people. And so we're not always making good use of the people around us. So yes, social media is here. Social media has a lot of wonderful things to it, and it's ways to connect. I connect with people that I wouldn't be able to connect with anymore. But it's also one of those things where we need to get a little bit more with other people. So I'm going to leave you on this one. It's going to be a little bit louder, so just so I know. So last slide, again, old school. So you got to move, and you can't have music without Michael. So what I want you to take from this is find movement in your daily activities. Find some kind of movement. Find something that you do and try to do it with someone else. And I think I did it under 1 hour. All right, take care.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. Any questions? I know Ashley had some things. I'm glad you brought up about sustainability. Again, what they do on the work days. And again, if you think high school kids still or no?
Yes.
So you high schoolers, you know any high schoolers who need their volunteers, they can also come in. I like the badge. You're actually a worker. All right. So high schoolers can also come there to get their hours that they need. But you know, the thing is that when we start to eliminate our movement in general, our body responds to it, and that's what's so important. So, another 2 hours a week. But it's not going to be, there's no music today. So, have a good one. If you have anything else, I'm sure you can send any kind of questions as well.
Thank you so much, Professor Opon. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. What was the name of that group?
Which one?
The tree.
Oh, it's Ashley. She needs to name.
Oh, the sustainability union? Do you want me to sign you up? Yeah, sure.
All right. See, Ashley.
Oh my gosh.
Ashley's going to be my public relations person here, marketing person, because she's got all this going. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, here, you can put your email in. I've got a few people to add to.
Thank you so much. And I love to talk about like music. And all the music.
Yeah, I know some were a little bit louder.
So we meet the second and fourth.
We're a little bit louder at times.
Don't worry about it. It was good. Thank you.
And then 10:30 on Monday and 2 to 2:30 on Tuesday.
I can probably guys make sure you don't